Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here. We'll kind of trade off back and forth through the presentation. We appreciate you being here. You know, it's the middle of the semester and classes are, you know, getting more and more intense at this time. So the fact that you're taking this time is really gracious. We're happy to be here and be helpful in any way we can be to the exciting initiatives that the college has launched and that Danette is leading. And it sounds like many of you are already helping to push forward. So it's really an honor. What we thought we would do today is talk, just kind of give an overview of what some of is happening with portfolios around the country and some examples of how different institutions are using that. And we're going to particularly focus on the question of integration and integrative learning. And so we'll then kind of set up the frameworks with that and then look at these 4 different case studies from different institutions. So, and as said, for those that can stay, we'll have time hopefully for questions after. And then in the afternoon, we'll do more of a kind of like a nuts and bolts implementation question. So it sounds like most of you, you know, that there's already some familiarity with portfolios here at the college. That there's places where portfolios are underway. This is, you know, just thinking about, you know, what's the basic definitions of portfolios. And I think key things here is it's both the collection of student work and the reflections on their learning. And the reflective part we find is really critical to giving the portfolio meaning. It's not just a file cabinet of work. It's students examining their work and thinking about what does it mean. It's been around for a long time. Portfolio learning has been something that's you know, very common in some disciplines. And making it electronic allows it to have different kinds of artifacts, not just papers, videos, recordings, performances, art, all sorts of things, more portability, more flexibility in terms of how do you let different people look at it, organize it, you know, what can students do to kind of repurpose it for different purposes. So the electronic portfolio piece has been growing probably for the last maybe 15 years or so.
And what this slide is showing us is, this is from the Campus Computing Project. They did a survey of the field of ePortfolios across higher ed in 2011. And what this does is showing the growth from 2003 through 2010 in the percentages across the different sectors of higher ed, percentages of colleges and universities that are using ePortfolio. And you can see, you know, community colleges are lagging behind slightly, but the growth since 2003 has been quite dramatic. And if you looked at it across, you'll see that it's averaging about 50%, you know, back in 2010. And this is great, and this is interesting. It's great to see the number and the percentages of schools, but it really doesn't tell us a lot about kind of how portfolios are being used in those colleges. And if you think about it, there are, oh, we're going to have a little bit of meeting. I've got the clicker.
She's got the clicker. We can have one of those who got the clicker contests.
I'll just put the clicker down for a second. So if you look at the different, oh, now he's going to walk away, so now I'm going to need the clicker. The different types of portfolio. No, I got it. The first is the career ePortfolios, kind of those showcase ePortfolios that students use to kind of help them, you know, get jobs or maybe even to transfer from a community college to a 4-year school to really kind of showcase their best work. There's also the assessment portfolio, using it to assess student learning outcomes. Some schools choose to take that as a focus. And then the third is, of course, the learning portfolio, where it really becomes a tool for student learning. And all of those are, you know, excellent ways to use ePortfolio. But what we've found is if you put them all together, what you create is this integrative ePortfolio that can really address all 3 of those. So when we talk about the integrative ePortfolio, that's kind of one way to think about it.
Another way to think about that is to think about it in terms of integrative learning. So as Wade mentioned, I was part of a program with the Carnegie Foundation and AACU on integrative learning that was 3-year project with 10 institutions, kind of addressing the challenge of fragmentation in higher education, and understanding that while we may understand why we offer this course or that course, for very often for students, it's kind of a jumble, that students come in and feel like they're being shunted along from class to class without necessarily understanding why or how it, what it's supposed to add up to. So the kind of core challenge for the Integrative Learning Project was this statement here from AAC&U: fostering students' abilities to integrate learning over time, across courses, and between academic, personal, and community life is one of the most important goals and challenges of higher education. And so we've taken that, we took part in this project, and we took an enormous amount out of it in terms of informing our portfolio. That we weren't only interested in integrating those different types of portfolios, we were also wanted to use the portfolio to support an integrative education for students who would help them understand not only how the curriculum fit together, but also the co-curriculum and their lived experience, and help them really rethink who they were as learners. So I'll talk about that more when we talk about LaGuardia towards the end of the presentation. But that approach to portfolio is now becoming increasingly common, both folks using the portfolio for those different purposes and using it when they think about it in terms of the impact on students, trying to support an integrative learning effort. So I think you all, the way that you're coming at that, kind of the ways that the portfolio is part of this larger initiative, really makes a tremendous amount of sense. Excellent, thank you. So just let's hear, a couple of examples. What came up? What kind of ideas came up in your conversation? Either something that you thought of or something you heard from your partner that you were talking to about ways that the portfolio could support integrative learning and what that would look like. Who wants to, please?
So I've used ePortfolios in all my classes, even large ones,
Great.
and I find that it's the reflection piece that really is what helps, but also what is most challenging for students. I find that they just have no idea how to reflect. They see it as dinky and not a real thing, and yet they're terrible at it.
Yeah.
And so they get mad when you give them feedback saying no, you need to do this. And yet it's that reflection that I think they get better at. I don't think it's rocket science, but I also think having that time to really reflect on and take ownership for your own learning instead of it just being this external stuff that here's a bunch of checklist of things you have to do and people give me exams and I have to make it through. And it really does kick it back to them seeing the big picture as well as all of these little pieces. So, but it's hard and time consuming. So.
Excellent. That's great.
I was just going to say, yes, students don't come in learning how to reflect.
Yeah.
So one of the things you have to think about is how are we going to teach them how to reflect and how do we scaffold that kind of across our curriculum. And I had the same thing, I would always get those reflections that they tell you what you want to hear. You were a really great instructor and I really learned a lot from you. I mean, that's great for my ego, but not really what we wanted in the reflection. So how do we think about that as a tool for them to learn and reflect?
Yeah. And I think it's no accident reflection is the key here. I mean, if you think in a Deweyan terms, the ways that Dewey posits reflection as a way of making connections, connecting one experience to another experience and making meaning from it, and that's really crucial for this kind of integration, both at the institutional level but also the individual level. Well, what else came up? Go ahead, please.
Because they are so fragmented in their lifestyle now, I think this just gives a great way to tie together courses, and even before all the short form communication, to tie it together with all the other courses. And it's kind of like all of us are very committed learners, actually, and so it's kind of a way of teaching them how to be more committed or more aware learners and tying things together.
which is very often something that, while we know that's really crucial, we actually spend less time on some things like that because we get so caught up in this topic or that topic, but actually that learning how to learn process. Back in the back and then you.
We just had a question that came up really fast and we didn't resolve about audience. And it seems like when you put all those things on that plate that you put together, that the audience may change. And the three things that came up really fast were there'd be a professional like us trying to assess learning, possibly other students trying to figure out directions that they might go, and then, of course, the reflection for the students' sake themselves. So we didn't get past it. We didn't have enough time, but that was the main thing.
No, and that's a great question and a great thought, and it actually does kind of shift that conversation, even as a classroom instructor, of who is your audience. The audience is no longer the student giving me a piece of work, and it's private between the two of us. The audience becomes more public, and to have that conversation with students about what that means and who is your audience. And a lot of times, I do a lot of social pedagogy where students are looking at each other's work, and what that does, and outside evaluators and things like that, it really elevates the work of the student. But what it does is it gives you the opportunity to have that conversation with students about audience and what that means.
Go ahead.
It can give us an opportunity, as kind of, I would see ourselves as coaches, to pick the portfolios of the students that really are more aware, more conscious, and then put them for other students to look. That could be an example, and also it will help us as faculty to see the bigger picture, because we don't. We have 5,000 to 6,000 students, and we see our little classes, but what's really going on?
Yeah, I think those are both very true. That work, as students put it out there and reflect on it, has value to them, but it also becomes a resource then for student learning and for faculty learning and for starting to see how students are connecting or not connecting things, and kind of pushes. I mean, I know in my college, sometimes when we show portfolios and faculty who are, say, working with very early level students, and they see a portfolio from a student later on, oh, wow, that was my student who did this. Now I'm seeing them at a whole different way, and kind of starting to think about that both horizontally and vertically about how it's fitting together. Well, this is great. So it's, you've got a lot of things to draw on. It's very helpful for us to kind of get a sense of some of what your thinking is. And it's also probably helpful for you all to see this is, you've got folks who are already well underway in thinking about how to do this. So hopefully what we show you now can add to some of that, and think about how faculty who have some of those same kinds of aspirations are doing this at other institutions. So when we think about integration at LaGuardia, you can see some of those same kinds of themes coming up. So we're looking at the way we understand our pedagogy for portfolios. And really, portfolio is about pedagogy. It's very little about the technology. It's really, while you don't want to not pay attention to the technology at all, it's not the point. The point is thinking about it as a teaching and learning process. So we think about it as an integrative social pedagogy. And what we mean by that is thinking about connections across disciplines and semesters, connections between the academic curriculum and the lived curriculum, and then using it as a tool, kind of as came up here, for connections between students and students, students to faculty, and students to external audiences, so that the learning becomes more visible and students think of their learning as a valuable process for themselves and for others. The other piece that I'd like to bring in quickly here, see if I can do this. It's always, it's a little audacious to try to borrow from Randy Bass. I don't know if any of you know Randy. He's the associate provost at Georgetown University, and I think one of the most innovative thinkers in higher education. And he gave a talk a while back where he was, focusing on ePortfolios. They're moving forward with ePortfolios at Georgetown, and he was thinking about he was giving a keynote at a conference. And he was particularly interested in he started with the question of high impact practices. So using the George Koo, AAC&U list of high impact practices, practices that have been shown through a long aggregation of studies to make a positive impact on students across institutions. And this is the list that AAC&U and George Koo came up with. So a lot of things that we're familiar with in terms of first-year experience, learning communities, and so forth. And he said, if we're looking at that, he started to take that apart a little bit. First, he said, well, let's think about what comes out of those high-impact practices. What are some of the common traits or outcomes? And that these are practices that help students attend to underlying meaning or discern patterns or to integrate and synthesize, to view issues from multiple perspectives or apply knowledge in diverse situations. And then he kind of looked at where these were taking place, and he noted that a lot of it is around the edges of higher education, that it's not necessarily what we have assumed traditionally to be our core disciplines and so forth, that these are things that are kind of added on. But he said it's interesting that this is actually where a lot of the most significant learning is taking place. And then he posed this proposition, which I really liked, and he was kind of thinking about where the traditional formal curriculum, the high-impact practices. He talked also about online learning, participatory culture of the web, experiential learning. I can't walk through the whole thing, but he was talking about how all those add up, and then how it fits with portfolios. And he suggested this proposition, which is that college-based ePortfolios are a space for students to create an identity that links the experiences of the traditional or formal curriculum with the pedagogical and co-curricular experiences that engage and transform learners. So he's putting that out there kind of as a challenge to the field of ePortfolio. And it struck me as I listened to that this really spoke to some of what we've seen with portfolios, that ePortfolios are a linking device. They're not the be-all and end-all in themselves, but what they do is help pull together some of the most meaningful learning that's taking place at an institution, inside classrooms and out, and deepen that learning. So when we think about integrative learning, that's part of what we have in mind. And part of what we want to do is kind of look at that proposition with, keep that proposition in mind as we're looking at other institutions. We're going to draw on a set of institutions that are part of the work of LaGuardia's Making Connections National Resource Center, and particularly our Connect to Learning project, which is a national project with 27 campuses around the country. We're working with about 70, 80 institutions altogether, most of them in the New York metropolitan region, but then this is our national project. And we're working with a range of different kinds of institutions, small liberal arts colleges, community colleges, Research One universities across the country who are underway with Portfolio. And we're providing mutual support for each other, kind of a community of practice, and helping to harvest our best practices and turn that into a resource for the field. So I'm going to look at two institutions first. First is San Francisco State, which is a large, kind of comprehensive urban institution, and they've got widespread use of portfolios. You can see the way they start this notion of, this is one of the graphics they use to communicate to students about the portfolio process, the collecting and connecting and the content and building and then publishing and sharing. That's kind of a common type of dynamic. They let you look at the portfolios, sample portfolios, and I'm trying to go to one here, see if it comes up in technology. Okay, so this is Claire Bailey, and this is her portfolio, which she's made public and agreed to have them make public for the field. And if you look across the top there, you can kind of see a range. She's got a mission statement, a resume. She's got her classes and competencies, her values and skills, leadership, and the liberal studies program. She's part of the liberal studies program there. If we go into the liberal studies major, there she's got then her courses down this side. And I'm going to look at, those are broken down. She's got her literature, language, and communication, her life science, her social science, and then her creative arts and humanities. And if we drill down into this, we see then specific courses. And I just thought it would be interesting to see, for you to see, what this looks like. So she's got then, in here, she's got her reflections, her descriptions on the course, and her reflections on the course. This is a course on the thought and image, kind of a gen ed course in liberal studies. And it happened to focus, I'm sure it was thematically organized, focused on gardens and the ways in which they're portrayed in works of literature. So it's a nice interdisciplinary focus there, and looking at gardens around the world, written texts, paintings, landscape design, etc. So then she talks about how this affected her, and then she's got one of her particular assignments in here in which she talks about gardening as an extension of herself. So it's the combination of the work itself that she did, plus her reflection on that piece of work, and her reflection on the course as a whole. And so she's putting that together with every course that she's taken in this major, she's got that combination. And then she's got her capstone course here, which was a liberal studies seminar, in which she's got a series of reflections and her research paper, which is intended to kind of pull things together and allow the student to demonstrate all their competencies. So it's a nice example. So you can see here, this is a project-based approach, and in which they were researching, doing some research about sustainability and globalization. And again, that combination of her reflections and the work itself. So that gives you a sense of some of the kind of integrative approaches in a liberal arts, liberal studies construct at San Francisco State, where you've got the portfolio and a set of disciplinary classes, and then very explicit interdisciplinary classes. So that fit between the kind of trying to make the curriculum more integrative, and then the student helping that process along, making the connections between what they're learning and how it's adding up. Virginia Tech is another institution that has done a lot of work with portfolios, has done some really exciting stuff. And I'm going to show a couple of quick snapshots here. This is from an English student, Candace Nam and Chu. I love that, the wonderful, wonderful portfolio of Candace Nam and Chu. And in her portfolio, they really organize their portfolio around competencies. So they've established a set of learning outcomes, and rather than organize the portfolio by her courses, what they've done here, and what she's done is identify particular competencies. So she's got the learning outcomes for English majors, their ability to read critically and compose an effective analysis of literary text. And then she's chosen a piece of work that she feels demonstrates that competency. So it's an analysis of the Inferno entitled Dante's Paradox of Homosexuality. And so she's kind of, step by step talking through her competencies. This is another student portfolio from Virginia Tech that I liked a lot. It was part of a first-year experience learning community that was focused on service learning. And I thought they did a really brilliant job with this. It's a little bit cut off, it looks like, on this screen, but you can see down the left-hand side some of the categories here. So she's got her about me, this is her personal journeys, under the where I'm from, what I bring to the table. And in the where I'm from, they ask the students to talk about where they're coming from entering the college. So it's part of that process of adjusting to college life. And this young woman decided to write a poem to explain where she was coming from. I just love this. You probably can't see it from the back, so I'll read just one of the stanzas. It says, I am from long, winding country roads, from mountains that are the guardians of black gold and raging rivers. I am from a front porch that smells of fresh cedar and maple, with an old porch swing and a sunset only the heavens could create. I am from the berry-filled forests and wildflower fields where the flowers bloom in early May, and the smell of sweet honeysuckle lasts all summer. I am from Sunday breakfast with Daddy, and the taste of a charcoal grilled dinner, and Mama's blueberry cobbler melts in my mouth. You get a real sense of who this student is and what she values about the life she's grown up with. She's got also pages in here that are talking, this is, like as I said, this is a learning community that's focused on service learning. So they were doing work with a food bank in their area, and she's describing that and reflecting on that and how did it operate, what did she learn from the process. And then she's got one of the pieces that I really love about this. They designed this recursive activity when they talk about what I bring to the table. And they do it twice. They do it first when they start in the first few weeks of the semester, kind of this, again, thinking about where am I coming from, what resources do I have. So starting from a perspective that the student is bringing intellectual and experiential resources to their academic life. But then, late in the term, they say, let's go back. Let's rethink what are you bringing to the table? What have you learned about who you are and the resources you have? And I just love this young woman, Molly's, what she wrote. She said, when I wrote the first edition of this paper, I had a very hard time doing so. Hi Watt, who was another student, picked up on the fact that I mainly wrote about what others thought I brought to the table, not what I thought. So before I began this paper, I really rethought this past semester and how I have grown as a student, a server, and a person. My first semester in college has defiantly redefined self-discipline, leadership, and learning. A difficult lesson that it's okay to ask for help. And it's also okay to not always be number one. So her learning here is a deeply personal learning in many ways about what it means to come, be from the elite part of a high school and to come and be in a college with all sorts of other students who are also elite, and how do you start to, rethink who you are in a new context. So I think that deeply personal part and connecting that to what did she learn in all her different, classes is key to what we see happening in portfolios. It's partially academic and cognitive. It's partially affective and developmental.
And I think what I love about those examples is you're starting to see that there's no kind of one-size-fits-all for the portfolio, and every institution kind of takes it and customizes it. And I know when Wade introduced me, you mentioned my work at the new community college, and you were told you could all ask the question of what I would do if I got to start it all over again. And I'm kind of in that position. I've been at the new community college for what feels like 12 days, but about 3 months. So instead of talking about my work there, what I want to do is talk about my work a little bit at my former institution, which was Tungus Community College, which is located in Farmington, Connecticut. It's a suburban community college that serves about 5,000 students. And one of the things we decided, I've been working with portfolios there as the ePortfolio leader since 2005. Started with a team of people very much like you're doing, started moving things forward. And one of the things we realized very quickly, if we wanted to move this forward, one of the things we were hearing from faculty is, well, how do you know this is working? And so we started to focus on kind of what evidence could we gather kind of around the impact that ePortfolio was having on student learning. And so we focused in a number of different areas, but one of them was in our developmental English courses. And at Tungus, about 65 to 70% of our students begin in a developmental English course. We actually have 2.5 levels of developmental English. And so one of the things we started to do, we really wanted to focus on student learning and what we were seeing in terms of student learning, in particular around reflection. So we started longitudinally looking at students. And I'm going to show you an example through the reflections of what we were starting to see in their ePortfolios. So this is Joe, Joe's a student who came to us. He's a general studies major. He began in our lowest level of developmental English. And at the end of the semester, he was asked to write a reflection on what he learned about writing during the semester. And so here's his reflection, a little piece of it, a little snapshot. When I was writing paper, and I took this directly from his reflection, when I was writing paper, the most struggles I had were finding articles and tying ideas together. If I knew a lot about the topic, it was easy to write. I got some really solid articles that got to the point of my argument. And that's not bad. This is our lowest level of developmental. That's good. That's kind of what we're expecting. Then we take him, we move him to, this is now our second level of developmental, one step before composition. And you could see his reflections starting to improve. That first one, who's really responding directly to the prompts and telling us just what we wanted. Here, he's talking about reading more complex text, being able to interpret, thinking more critically, talking about a thesis, backing it up, and then, of course, the technical things that are always important in an English class, MLA, vocabulary, and knowing that he's not quite at that college level yet and wanting to improve. So you can see we've kind of taken a jump up in the level of his reflection, and he wants to be able to use, I love this, big words and incorporate them more eloquently. I love that he uses big words and eloquent in the same sentence. So then we followed him through composition. And here's his reflection at the end of composition. I think I've made some progress. I've improved on finding the deeper meaning, which has always been an issue for me. So just from, only writing about stuff I knew about and taking those articles to really finding deeper meaning. And simplifying my writing, shortening my sentences because they're too wordy. So you can see, and what we really wanted to do was be able to show that these reflections are really demonstrating what our students are learning. Sometimes in a way more so than the paper itself can demonstrate. So that was kind of one piece of evidence that we used to really kind of help the developmental English faculty see how the portfolio and how reflection can really enhance students' learning. Some other things we looked at, because it's always good to have numbers to back up what you're doing. We studied, we did a comparison. We had a very nice even distribution of ePortfolio sections of developmental English and non-ePortfolio sections of developmental English for 2 semesters. We're only able to do this for 2 semesters. And what we saw, this is our lowest level, reading, writing 1, reading, writing 2. These are 6-credit courses, just so you know, and this is kind of a 3-credit pre-comp course. Some students jump right from there to there. And you can see the success or the pass rates were significantly higher in those ePortfolio sections. So just an indicator that this was having an impact. Now, of course, we can qualify this and we can say we could look at the faculty who were teaching it. Were they innovative faculty because they took on the ePortfolio? Perhaps, right? That is one thing we could say. But you start to combine it with these other pieces and the other things that we're seeing, and it really does start to make an argument. And one of the reasons why we had to stop doing this at the end of fall of 2010 was the developmental English faculty started looking at this, and we no longer had our distribution because they all started using ePortfolio, and the numbers just, we couldn't even do the comparison anymore. But the success rates have still maintained themselves, even with our adjunct faculty and those other faculty coming on board. The other thing we looked at, and I apologize, the word retention somehow got removed from the slide, was our retention rate in those courses. Retention rates in our college were very, very low. And what we saw in this sample was we did have a significantly higher retention rate in those courses in developmental English that were using ePortfolio. So again, just another indicator that it was, the ePortfolio was having some sort of impact with our students. It was resonating with them. And then my director of institutional research at Tungsas, as we started working, and we were working with it not just in developmental English, but in a number of our career programs, a number of our liberal arts courses. And he decided to just run this one day just for fun, because I guess that's what directors of IR do. And what he saw, he started to look at the retention rates based on the number of ePortfolio courses a student was enrolled in. And so you can see if they had no ePortfolio courses, they weren't using it at all, the retention rate was about 52.7. Okay? And you can see as it goes up, we hit a max of 71.4 with 3 courses. But even if you just compare the no to the 4, you'll see that's a significant, 14% higher retention rate. And just to kind of quickly explain what we think the drop-off is for. Community college students, working full-time, going to school full-time, managing families, all those things, they can't necessarily handle all of that. So that's, I think, what that's how we explain the drop-off in success with that 4th ePortfolio course. They're just doing too much. So, that was one of the things we started to look at, is how ePortfolio is really increasing student success. And so that was interesting. There actually is new data that's continued to support this, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't have access to it to share with you. And then I wanted to kind of shift gears. So that's what we did with our developmental English, and talk about what we did in our career programs and our capstone programs. I was the program coordinator for the Computer Information Systems program, and we integrated ePortfolio throughout our curriculum. And in their capstone course, which was an internship and work experience, they had to create 2 ePortfolios. They had to create an assessment ePortfolio, and they had to create a showcase ePortfolio. That showcase was one that they would share with employers or potentially 4-year institutions. And then in this assessment portfolio, we asked them to select an artifact from any of their courses, and they had to line it up. We had 10 general education outcomes. If you can, I know this is hard to read. We actually call them abilities, not outcomes at Tunxis. And we asked them to pick a piece of work that they felt best demonstrated achievement of that ability. And then they had a reflection, and they had to write about why they felt it demonstrated that ability. And this is a portfolio from Josiah, who's a computer information systems major, if you couldn't tell from his banner. And I just wanted to share a little bit of his reflection in quantitative reasoning. And I love to show the QR example because one of the biggest areas of resistance I had at Tunxis was with the math faculty who were going, oh, no, we don't reflect. We solve problems. We do equations, we do all that math stuff, but we don't really reflect. And they really didn't understand how to articulate quantitative reasoning. And I think Josiah does a really great job of articulating quantitative reasoning. And in there, he starts off with, he used an example from his statistics class. The project had us analyze sample data. We had to graph histograms and scatter plots, retrieve figures from regression and correlation analysis, and draw conclusions based on that information about the relationship between prerequisite and actual exam scores. He has got that lingo down, right? He can throw all those big terms. Is that quantitative reasoning? That's a good use of language. But then he goes on a little further. When you're solving real-world problems, you need to be able to go beyond the fundamentals or beyond the language of mathematics. Quantitative reasoning is mastering the context and realistic applications of these theories and applying them to solve complex problems. These skills can be used to analyze risk, performance, and trends in business or any position that deals with a lot of data. He understands what quantitative reasoning is. Quantitative reasoning is more than just doing that regression and correlation analysis. It's being able to take that and apply it and solve a problem. And my math faculty kind of went, oh, that's good. So along with that, in our capstone courses, one of the things we've done for the past few years was we shared our ePortfolios with our advisory boards. And this survey, we did a survey with them after, and this went to Computer Information Systems advisory board members, Engineering Tech Studies, Business Administration, and Business Office Technology. And we asked them a number of questions, and you can see they felt, not only was it, 96% of them felt it was an effective tool for showcasing their work to potential employers or 4-year institutions, it was an effective tool to demonstrate student learning. They really felt that they could see what students were learning from the ePortfolio. We also asked our students themselves what they thought about going through this process and creating their assessment portfolios. And they said, 99% of them understand how their classes relate to their major. Wow, they got it. They got how everything fit together. In fact, 95% of them actually understand how their classes fit together, and 97% saw meaningful connections between coursework and real-world experiences. And I know we did another round of this in 2012, and again, these numbers really didn't change much. It was really working.
So the last institution we've looked at, San Francisco State, Virginia Tech, Tunxis. The last one we're going to show is LaGuardia. And you may or may not know anything about LaGuardia. We're one of the campuses of City University. We're in southwestern Queens. And we have about 18,000 credit students and somewhere between 45,000 and 55,000 non-credit students. And the key defining characteristic of our college is the diversity of our student body. Because we're in Queens, Queens is really the equivalent of the Lower East Side for the late 20th and early 21st century. So 70% of our students are non-native born, coming from 160 different countries, speaking, I think it's up to now about 125 different primary languages. Significantly female, low income, and the other thing that's really key is that 80 to 90%, Laura said 65%, 80 to 90% of our students come in needing some level of developmental skills. So it's a fascinating student body, culturally very rich, bringing all sorts of experiences, but academically very uneven. So it's a great group to work with. With that in mind, our goal, these were our goals for the portfolio, which incorporated the learning portfolio and the assessment portfolio and the presentation or career portfolio. So some of the things that came up in our earlier conversation about building student engagement and reflection, and at the same time helping faculty deepen their understanding of who students were, what they were bringing to the college, and what was happening to them while they were at the college. And to use that as part of our assessment process, so to make our assessment more authentic and more grounded in real student and faculty work. This gives you some sense of our growth over time. This last column here is 2009-10. Since that time, it's kind of continued to grow, but at a slower rate. So we're averaging somewhere between 13 and 14,000 students per semester, per year, are doing portfolios. So that makes us, we're close to scale, but not fully at scale. So this is not cumulative, this is each year. So cumulatively, we're well, I think, over 70,000 now portfolios. Sometimes people ask about where students do portfolios. This is a crude schematic, and it's always changing, so it's not totally accurate, but it gives you some sense. Our students start their portfolios in a first-year experience course. We had here a course that was required for most students in the college. Our college requires students to do experiential learning internships. And so we had a pre-internship course where students were required to do portfolios, and then capstone courses. This actually turned out to be the largest area of growth, which was faculty saying, oh, we want to do portfolios, or we as, that was first individually, and then later, we as a program or department want to build portfolios in across our curriculum. So not just doing these, but scaffolding the portfolio more intensively through the curriculum. A lot of our professional programs are using the portfolios, similar to what Laura found in business, in our health sciences, in education, using it as a credential portfolio. And as I said, our assessment work, which kind of lagged behind it first, has grown in importance. We just finished our Middle States accreditation, and our use of the portfolio was highlighted by Middle States for helping us move beyond standardized tests, which we have to do as a state institution, but finding ways to make our assessment more authentic, more grounded in the real work that faculty value and have assigned to students. So building our assessment right on the assignments that faculty have developed and deepened and built throughout the years. So we've been able to then look at the ways that students, not just an end measure, but how students are growing and changing over time. So similar in some ways to what you saw with Laura's student. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we've got a set of competencies, much like the ones we've been talking about. Faculty have done curriculum maps where they're mapping where those competencies are developed and reinforced, and then where they're assessed. So every program now has a curriculum map like this. This is the kind of stuff that Middle States loves, right? Be able to show how every single discipline, every program, every major is building this in. And then how you're actually using, you're not only assessing that work, but using it to make recommendations for improvement and actually implementing those recommendations. So our assessment work is going forward, but our work with integrative learning continues to be really critical to what we do. Our focus on helping students examine those links across courses and semesters and disciplines, and to consider their own growth in change. To link the personal and the academic, and to develop new identities. The students can have more than one portfolio, but what it means is that the portfolios have some, by major, a student has a portfolio, but that portfolio might be different if they're an engineering student or a nursing student or a fine arts student, that they might have some different categories and different ways of thinking about what the portfolio does. And that's really important because our disciplinary differences are important. We want to think about connections, but we're not all kind of assimilating into the Borg here. You know, we have different priorities that it's important to respect. So I'm not going to, because we're running a little later on time, I'm not going to spend much time on the data. It's similar to what Laura showed. So this is like about high pass rates in our classes, looking at portfolio and non-portfolio courses. And we see that the portfolio courses are significantly higher in terms of the high passes, like a C or above. So that's a significant, our students are not only passing the courses, they're passing it with at a higher level. We see very nice patterns in terms of retention over multiple years because we've been doing portfolios for many years. We were able to track this for years and years and years. And interestingly, we see not only a gain in general for the use of the portfolio, but particularly a gain for where faculty have been part of one of our faculty development seminars. I think that really underscores the importance of the pedagogy and of faculty working together to help each other think about how to do this well. When we see the gain between the non-portfolio courses and the portfolio courses is even higher. It's about a 12 percentage point gap in terms of retention. And I'll just quickly mention this data because I think it might be of interest to you all. We use the CESI, you probably use the NESI, to look at engagement patterns. So this helps us think about, well, why are we seeing these gains? It says the NESI and the CESI really look at behaviors in classes, help us understand what's happening in a class that's really connecting to students. So this is an example of a question, how much is your coursework emphasized synthesizing and organizing ideas, information, or experiences in new ways? And we're looking at the percentage of students who responded at the high end, quite a bit or very much, here at LaGuardia in a given year. And we've got one of the advantages of this is the national survey, the NESI and CESI are well constructed, highly respected. It's also got national comparisons. So nationally, 57.7% of students said quite a bit or very much. At LaGuardia, 67.8%, which that's the kind of difference that helps us win awards and so forth. But the ePortfolio students use another 11 percentage points higher. So students in ePortfolio courses were much more likely to report they were engaged in critical thinking type activities. So the portfolios seem to go along with and support and enhance those critical thinking activities. Similarly, this is the last data slide I'll show. This is a question: how much has your experience in this course contributed to your knowledge, skills, and personal development in understanding yourself? So nationwide, in community colleges, 52.5, just barely over half of students felt that their courses were contributing to an understanding of themselves. At LaGuardia, across the board, 68.3. In the ePortfolio, Paris is 79.9%. So not quite, but getting close to double what it is nationally. So I think that, here, what we're seeing is that the ePortfolio, with the kinds of pedagogies, the integrative pedagogies that faculty are using, the combination is helping students make the connection and feel that their education is personally valuable and is deepening their sense of who they are and where they're going. Last thing I would do is just mention some practical tips here. We'll talk about this more in the afternoon, but maybe there's questions about that, maybe there's questions about other things. Some of the things that we've learned are really key to pulling off an integrative ePortfolio. So I won't talk through them all, but I think they're all valuable. Thinking very much, as I've said, it's pedagogy. It's about the pedagogy, not the technology. That we're thinking about the whole student. That if we want reflection to be part of our curriculum, we've got to start from that and design backwards, the kind of Grant Wiggins backwards design. Faculty development is crucial, and it's not about kind of somebody with the answer telling everybody else what to do. It's faculty collectively figuring that process out, figuring out what works for you with your classes, your students, your disciplines. You've got to figure out how do you help students with this process. Peer mentoring is crucial. It can't sit all on the faculty. Got to find ways to use peer mentors to help guide students, and that has benefits of its own. And really, this last one, that I think that as you do ePortfolio, it really does force you to rethink what you do in large and small ways across the institution. It is not something that really just stays at a class level. It really starts to span to think about changing our normal operating procedures as departments and as an institution. And that sometimes when we start ePortfolio, I think I sometimes feel guilty, like if I'm encouraging people to do this without saying, you've got to take this seriously and think about it as a long-term process that takes time and has ripple effects. That as you start to learn about what students are learning and what they're not learning, or how do we make connections, that it forces us to think differently about our educational process. So we'll leave things there. This PowerPoint will be available to you. There's lots of resources that you can access, and a lot of them are on the web. I particularly point out these top two. There's a new journal, the International Journal of ePortfolio. I think it's on its 4th issue, just came out
this morning.
Right, and Randy Bass's piece, which is really brilliant. It's somewhat has some of the same things that I referred to earlier, where he's taken now and reflected on the whole question of integration and what are we doing in higher education. And I think it's a wonderful touchstone for you. So I hope this has been helpful.